Why did the Roman Empire collapse? Not because of one battle, not because of one weak emperor, and not simply because barbarian armies crossed its borders. The truth is much darker. Rome was already dying from within long before its enemies entered the gates. Its money was losing value. Its army had become too expensive. Its politics had turned violent. Its borders were too wide to defend. And in the end, the greatest empire of the ancient world could no longer save itself. This is the real story of why Rome fell. From 27 BC, when Augustus became the first Roman emperor, Rome entered its golden age. For nearly 2 centuries, the empire enjoyed relative peace, enormous wealth, and unmatched power. At its height, in the 2nd century AD, Rome controlled vast territories across Europe, North Africa, Egypt, Greece, Syria, and the eastern Mediterranean. To the Romans, the Mediterranean Sea was not just a sea, they called it Mare Nostrum, our sea. Roman roads stretched across continents. Aqueducts carried water into crowded cities. Ports moved goods from one end of the empire to the other. Roman law shaped society, and Roman legions stood guard on distant frontiers. To many people living at that time, Rome looked impossible to defeat. But behind the marble temples, the stone roads, and the golden coins, there was a hidden problem. The empire had become too large, and the larger it became, the more expensive it was to maintain. Every road had to be protected, every border had to be defended, every soldier had to be paid. Every city needed food, water, order, and administration. Rome was not just ruling an empire, it was feeding a giant machine. And when a machine becomes too large, even a small crack can spread through the entire system. One of the first cracks appeared in Rome's money. At first, Roman coins had real value. They contained precious metals like silver and gold. People trusted them. Merchants accepted them. Soldiers were willing to be paid with them. And taxes could move through the empire in a system that still worked. But as the empire expanded, the cost of ruling it grew heavier. Wars became more expensive. The army needed more money. Public works needed more money. Officials needed more money, and the imperial treasury was under constant pressure. The emperors needed cash, but raising taxes too much could anger the people and weaken the provinces. So many emperors chose a more dangerous solution. They reduced the amount of silver inside the coins. On the outside, the coin still looked Roman. It still carried the image of the emperor. It still passed from hand to hand. But inside, it was worth less than before. Over time, more coins entered circulation, but each coin held less real value. Prices began to rise. The same amount of food cost more. The same goods required more coins. Workers demanded higher pay. Soldiers wanted higher salaries. And the government had to create even more money to keep up. This was not only an economic crisis, it was a crisis of trust. Because money is not just metal. Money is belief. It works because people believe it has value. And when people stop trusting the money of an empire, they slowly stop trusting the empire itself. Rome could survive losing a battle. It could survive losing a city. But it could not easily survive when the foundation of its economy began to rot. The second major problem was the army. Rome had been built by soldiers. Its legions conquered lands, defended borders, and carried the power of Rome across the ancient world. But over time, the same army that built the empire became one of its greatest burdens. To defend such a massive territory, Rome needed soldiers everywhere, along the Rhine, along the Danube, across North Africa, in the deserts of the East, in Britain, in the Balkans, and in countless frontier forts far from Rome. Every soldier needed food, every fort needed supplies, every horse needed care, every weapon had to be made, moved, and replaced. The cost was enormous, and the pressure never stopped. Each new war drained the treasury, each rebellion required troops, each threatened border demanded more soldiers, and when the government struggled to pay the army, loyalty began to change. Soldiers were supposed to serve Rome, but in many moments, they became more loyal to the general who paid them. This was extremely dangerous because the army was no longer just protecting the emperor. It could decide who became emperor. A general with loyal troops could march on power. A frontier army could raise its commander to the throne. and an emperor who lost military support could lose everything. When the throne depends on the sword, the empire can no longer be stable. This led directly into Rome's third major weakness: political chaos. From 235 to 284 AD, Rome entered one of the most dangerous periods in its history, the crisis of the 3rd century. During this period, emperors rose and fell with terrifying speed. Some were assassinated, some were overthrown, some died in battle, some were replaced by generals backed by their own armies. In less than 50 years, Rome saw a rapid succession of rulers, civil wars, breakaway regions, and constant power struggles. The title of emperor still existed, the palace still existed, the symbols of Rome still existed, but real power was becoming unstable. Authority no longer came mainly from law, tradition, or legitimacy. It came from force, and when power comes from force, everyone has a reason to use force. This damaged the entire system. The provinces became harder to control, taxes became harder to collect, the army became harder to manage, and ordinary people began to lose faith that the state could protect them. By the end of the 3rd century, Emperor Diocletian tried to save the empire by reorganizing it. He understood a painful truth. Rome had become too large for one ruler to control from one center. Messages took too long to reach distant borders. Armies moved too slowly across huge distances. A rebellion could explode before reinforcements arrived. An invasion could begin before Rome even understood the danger. So power was divided. Later, the division between East and West became more permanent. The eastern half of the empire was richer. It had stronger cities, better trade routes, and the powerful city of Constantinople. It was also easier to defend. The western half was weaker. It had longer borders, fewer resources, weaker cities, and more pressure from outside groups. At first, dividing the empire seemed practical, but over time it revealed something deeper. The empire was no longer one strong body. It was becoming two very different worlds. In 395 AD, after the death of Theodosius I, the empire was formally divided between East and West. The Eastern Roman Empire would survive for many more centuries, but the Western Roman Empire was slowly running out of time. And while the western half weakened, pressure from beyond the borders grew stronger. For centuries, Rome had faced Germanic tribes along its northern frontiers. But by the 4th and 5th centuries, the situation became more intense. Migration, war, hunger, and pressure from other peoples pushed many groups toward Roman territory. Not all of them came simply to destroy. Some were looking for land, some were seeking safety, some wanted to serve Rome, some were hired as soldiers. At first, Rome believed it could control this. It could turn outsiders into allies. It could allow certain groups to settle. It could use foreign warriors to defend the frontier. But when the central government became weak, this strategy became dangerous. Allies could become rivals, soldiers could become power brokers, and groups once managed by Rome began to act independently. Then came one of the greatest shocks in Roman history. In 410 AD, the Visigoths entered and sacked the city of Rome. For the Roman world, this was more than a military disaster. It was a psychological earthquake. Rome had been seen as eternal, untouchable, sacred, the heart of civilization. But now, the city itself had been violated. The empire did not end in 410, but the myth of Roman invincibility was broken. After that, the Western Roman Empire continued to shrink. Province after province slipped away. New kingdoms rose in former Roman lands. The authority of the Western Emperor became weaker and weaker. By 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire was only a shadow of what it had once been. That year, the Germanic leader Odoacer deposed Romulus Augustulus, the last Western Roman emperor. There was no final apocalyptic battle. No single day when the entire empire burst into flames. No dramatic moment when all of Rome vanished at once. There was simply an empty throne, a symbol of power that no longer had the strength to defend itself. 476 AD is often remembered as the end of the Western Roman Empire, but it was not the cause of Rome's collapse. It was the result. Rome did not fall because of Odoacer. Odoacer arrived when the empire was already too weak to resist. The real collapse had begun much earlier, in the debased coins, in the unpaid soldiers, in the violent politics, in the divided empire, in the overloaded borders, and in the slow disappearance of public trust. Rome did not fall for one reason. It fell because many crises arrived together: economic crisis, military crisis, political crisis, administrative crisis, and external pressure. Any one of these problems would have been dangerous. Together, they became fatal. The lesson of Rome is not simply that every empire can be defeated by enemies outside its borders. The deeper lesson is this: an empire can die from within before it is conquered from without. When money loses value, armies lose loyalty, politics loses stability, people lose trust, and the system loses the ability to repair itself. Collapse becomes only a matter of time. Rome once ruled the world, but in the end, what destroyed it was not only the armies at the gates, it was the cracks inside the empire, and that is why the Roman Empire actually collapsed.